President Trump is building his newly launched global peace initiative for Gaza. At the same time, he is surging U.S. military might to the Middle East with an eye on Iran. Today in Washington, D.C., representatives from more than 40 countries convened for the inaugural meeting of the President's Board of Peace. The goal there to stabilize Gaza and work on reconstruction. As diplomats were there to talk peace, U.S. tensions, though, as I mentioned, with Iran, are skyrocketing at this point. Here's the president from today.
Iran is a hot spot right now, and they're meeting, and they have a good relationship with the representatives of Iran, and, good talks are being had. It's proven to be, over the years, not easy to make a meaningful deal with Iran. And we do have some work to do with Iran. They can't have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. You can't have peace in the Middle East if they have a nuclear weapon. And they can't have a nuclear weapon, and they've been told that very strongly.
And you know who believes it? Iran, because he's already hit them in a very stealthy manner. Sources are telling Fox News the president has huddled with his top advisors about potential strike timelines if these talks with Iran collapse. And some reports say a decision could come this weekend. And news is just breaking. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is set to travel to Israel next week now. So he will update the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the status of what's happening with Iran. The Pentagon is building that massive presence in the region. Take a look at your screen here. The world's largest warship, the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group, is expected to arrive in the region next week. And just about 48 hours, the last 48 hours, more than 50 additional fighter aircraft have deployed, not to mention all the naval assets that were already there. It is the largest buildup of U.S. military air and naval power in the Middle East since the beginning of the Iraq War. And at the same time, all of this is happening, Iran and Russia are going to conduct joint naval drills in the Sea of Oman, a clear show of force. Former CIA Chief of Station Dan Hoffman.
I think Iran is trying to demonstrate, including with these latest military drills with Russia, that they have some military leverage of their own. At the end of the day, I think our military capacity in the region is enough, certainly, to inflict great harm on Iran. But I think we've got war planners in the military with our intelligence community wargaming this out.
This is a huge moment, not just for our nation and President Trump, but the world as well. Stability in that region is key, and that's what Trump wants. Victoria Coates standing by with analysis. Let's begin with Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin in D.C. Jennifer.
Harris, it's a bit surreal seeing the juxtaposition of President Trump presiding over the Board of Peace while preparing for war. The U.S. is engaged, as you mentioned, in the largest military buildup since the eve of the Iraq War. Meanwhile, in the Strait of Hormuz today, Iran and Russia are holding live-fire exercises as the IRGC flexes its own muscle. Iranian state TV aired footage of the joint Iran-Russia naval drill. The exercise includes vessel raids and ship seizures. Iran also sent a notice to airmen not to fly over Iranian airspace during the drills, which could include cruise missiles. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is deploying significant air power with more than 120 warplanes in the Middle East, 50, as you mentioned, in the past 48 hours. This includes 48 F-15 fighter jets, 18 F-35s, 6 E-3 Sentry AWACS planes, 22 KC-135 refueling tankers, part of an air bridge that would be needed for any sort of strikes, and 13 cargo planes, C-17s and C-5 cargo planes filled with equipment, and a squadron of F-22 Raptors. 6 are now en route to the UK after having to turn back to their base for technical reasons yesterday. The total number of E-3 Sentry AWACS deployed to the region are 6. Sending the AWACS marks a significant change in strategic posture. It's an airborne warning and control system with an integrated command and control battle management to provide an accurate real-time picture of the battle space to the Joint Air Operations Center. All eyes are on the USS Ford carrier strike group, which is nearing the Strait of Gibraltar, but still a few days from the eastern Mediterranean. Its final location is undetermined. Should it be ordered closer to Iran, it would have to pass through the Suez Canal, which would delay it being in position for any potential strikes. Or it could stay in the Eastern Med in case of any Iranian retaliation targeting Israel. Iran's atomic energy chief said today Iran won't back down, adding no country can deprive Tehran of its nuclear enrichment rights. President Trump just told the Board of Peace he expected a response from Iran's negotiating team in 10 days. Plane spotters in Israel just reported seeing an unmarked plane landing with U.S. Special Operations Forces. What we are not seeing is a buildup of U.S. land forces that would indicate a ground invasion like we saw before the Iraq War in 2003, Harris.
Well, look, Jennifer, when you say response in 10 days, when does the clock start? What does that look like?
Well, the clock started, it was supposed to be a 2-week response period after the negotiations, which took place in Geneva earlier this week. So that is what the president has said, and he's awaiting Iran's response. But anything goes. There could be triggers. And as we've reported, the battle space, for the most part, is pretty well set and could be ready as early as this weekend.
Well, and coupling with Russia complicates things mightily. Jennifer, thank you very much. And Jennifer did a great job laying out the military. You know I keep it in focus here on the Faulkner Focus. Let's take a closer look at that buildup of U.S. naval power in the Middle East in particular. The USS Gerald R. Ford is the Navy's newest and world's largest nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. It is more than 1,000 feet in length and can carry more than 75 aircraft and a crew of 4,000. The USS Abraham Lincoln is Nimitz-class carrier of the same length. It has the capacity for 65-plus aircraft and 5,000 personnel. This map, take a look, shows the U.S. military footprint surrounding Iran. There's no way they don't see us. The red markers indicate long-term American bases operating in that region, with additional facilities hosting U.S. forces across Iraq, the Gulf, and parts of the Eastern Mediterranean. Together, all of these sites form a wide arc of American air and naval power within striking distance, quick, of Iran. In focus now, Victoria Coates, former foreign policy and deputy national security advisor to President Trump, also the Heritage Foundation vice president of national security. Great always to have you. Let's start with mixing in this deadline that the president has given. How does Iran and its radical Islamic regime look at that?
Well, Harris, great to be with you. And, you know, President Trump is never going to hold himself to any particular timeline. He's going to act when he's ready to act, and the U.S. military is ready to act. He did that last spring in the 12-day war. He decided that that was the moment, and he did it. And I think this is not an accident that we have the meeting of the Board of Peace right now in Washington, D.C. I have met with a couple of folks who are in from the region and got their take on it, but it gives him the opportunity, like he had last spring on his first trip abroad, to Riyadh, Doha, and Abu Dhabi to consult with partners and allies before ordering that military action. And so in this case, you know, yes, they're talking about Gaza, but they can also talk about what might happen in the region, and he can have full consultation with our partners and allies.
How dire is this moment for Iran? The Iranian people have given their lives for freedom on the ground as that country's government slaughtered. We've seen the reports up to 30,000 people just in recent months.
It really is horrifying. And you know, the problems in Iran are just systemic. They can't fix them. In the summer of 2019, when we were doing the maximum pressure campaign, they had 50% inflation. The rial had lost 60% of its value, and food prices were up 85%. Now, they got some relief during the Biden administration because Biden stopped enforcing those sanctions, but they didn't invest it in anything, Harris. They didn't do anything to fix their economy. They spent it on horrible things, like the October 7th attacks on Israel, which weren't even in Iran. So they have a real crisis at home. And then they have this buildup, which, as you and Jen remarked, is historic, but it's the biggest one, not just since Iraq, but since the action against Maduro last month. So President Trump is demonstrating his ability to reach out and touch you in the Caribbean, yes, but also in the Middle East.
Yeah. Next time, we will get deeper into Russia as well. I have to let you go. Thank you so very much, Victoria Coates, for being with me.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.